Welcome back to the show, Mel.
Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm excellent.
You were one of the most watched episodes, if not the most watched episode out of my first four seasons. So
Yeah, it was pretty cool.
congratulations. And a lot of those viewers, they were local too, and not
Yeah, local to me.
me, local to you.
Yeah. They just like the drama. They just like the drama.
Yeah, I bet you only like a small percentage. Was a lot of people reach out to you about doing it, or
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Always. Yeah. Lots. I had so much amazing feedback from it. Yeah, it was pretty cool.
yeah, and plus you have a TikTok now that you didn't you lose your TikTok after we did our thing?
Absolutely. Yeah, I was up to like 15,000 and it got banned. I've had a few bans since then. The one I have now, fortunately, I've been able to keep it. I know the do's and don'ts now. No
Yeah,
more video responses. We don't do those very often because those get me banned.
really.
But yeah, we're back up to like 13.3K. So
What's your username there for people to follow you?
it's Recovery Queen Mel.
Okay, and I'll put it'll be in the bio like usual.
Yeah.
Um, so I forget what it was. There was a story that you started telling, and you're like, wait, I have a pending case on this, and I can't talk about it.
Yeah, my human trafficking conviction. Oh, that's over. Originally, when I was in active addiction, I was in active addiction for 20 years. That's what we spoke on the last time we talked. And I got caught up in some pretty crazy charges. I had 9 human trafficking charges, trafficking of fentanyl, trafficking of crack cocaine. And that's all over. So I ended up pleading. I pled to what I was guilty of. So I pled to 1 county human trafficking. And that was pretty well it. I was very fortunate. I was in the Sudbury Star and everything, my local paper. So, but it's all over and I can talk about it now.
Okay, well, so that was a really confusing thing when you brought that up. How does somebody who like prostitution's legal in your country?
Right.
So you were doing your thing, making your money, sex work style, and
Right.
how did you get caught up with trafficking?
Well, it's funny because traffic when people hear trafficking, human trafficking, they think of like the movies. They think of she kidnapped a minor and sold her into sex work, and it's really not that glamorous. It's not that dramatic. It was a fellow female, a drug addict. She wanted to make money for drugs, and I just so happened to know how to do that. So all I did was I put up a couple ads for her, and even though sex work is legal, she didn't get in trouble. But when she got caught up in her own case, she did a little bit of this, and then I got arrested, and that's the human trafficking. So I had human trafficking, and then I had like proceeds of crime, knowing it was in the commission of sex work. I think that was the one that I pled guilty to, actually. Um, but yeah, it wasn't this huge, like, she
Yeah,
was
that
just another addict that wanted to get involved in the game, and I knew the ropes, and I showed her the ropes, and then here
because you
I am.
because you showed her the ropes.
That's human trafficking. Yeah. So it's funny, my fentanyl, trafficking of cocaine was, I actually just took her money and went to get drugs from a drug dealer. And that is the trafficking of the substance. I never trafficked the substance myself. I was just an addict. But because I took her money and went and got the drugs, the Crown charged me with trafficking.
The damn crowd, because that's such bullshit. Because there's been so many times that like I've trafficked pills,
Right.
but it never would have held up in court around here.
Well, and that's the thing. Those were the charges that were dropped, but those were the ones that I was very concerned about because at the time in my community, even now, there's such a huge fentanyl epidemic. I know it's probably in your city too. All my friends are no longer with us. So at the time, and because I was a female, they were really wanting to make an example of me. I remember at my bail hearing, they were comparing me to violent PIMPs, trying to make it so I didn't get out of jail. So they really wanted to make an example of me, and those were the big charges, right? The human trafficking, I was concerned, but it was the trafficking of fentanyl. I could have done real time for that, right? So that's kind of how they got me. That's kind of how they got my plea in the end, is because they agreed to drop the actual fentanyl trafficking charge,
Oh, well, that's a relief then for you.
right?
What did you end up getting for the trap? If you don't mind me asking, what?
No, they were actually looking at, I was looking at 5 years in the pen. And I sat for 9 months of house arrest, and I have 2 years of probation, and the house arrest is all done. It was done in January. So I report once a month, and that's pretty well it.
That's cool, and
Yeah.
that's not bad at all. 2 years probate.
Right.
How is that 9 months of? I mean, I would imagine 9 months is easy time at home because we just went through a pandemic where we couldn't leave our houses anyway.
Right. Well, and the thing is, I'm a mom. I have my children, right? And I was very fortunate to get a probation officer um, to write me a letter saying as long as I was in the presence of my children that I was allowed to be out.
Oh, that's cool
So
then.
because I'm a single mom, I have to do school pickups, I have to do drop-offs, I have to do appointments and extracurricular activities. So I was very fortunate because I turned my life around, because I did all the work that I did. Um, she trusted me enough, we'll say, to let me have that little bit of leeway. And yeah, I was really lucky.
And you didn't abuse it or anything, and I'm sure they paid
No.
attention to that to make sure that.
Well, yeah, the local police know exactly who I am. So there was actually one instance where I have a teenage daughter, and we were out. It was probably, we live in a little community, but we were living in an even smaller community outside of my town, and there's no food at midnight. It was like 2 in the morning, so I brought the kids into town to go to Burger King, and I got pulled over. And thankfully I had my kid with me, and I had my letter, and the police was really great. But he did call my probation officer and tell her she was out, but she had her kid. So that was like the only thing that kind of made me nervous, like, is this a child activity? But she was like, yeah, you were feeding your kids. So
Yeah, that's cool then. And isn't one of your kids of, because like obviously we're friends on Facebook, so I
yeah.
see updates here and there. Did you get one of your kids or two of your kids back into like your life?
Yeah. So I have 3 girls, and also have a son that I had to give up while I was in active addiction. And my best friend took him home from the hospital. She's been raising him ever since. Shout out Jamie Lee. She's amazing. And recently, yeah, I've had my son back in my life. So I have custody of my 2 oldest, my 10-year-old, my 17-year-old. Been fighting for Emily, my third daughter, for 3 years since my release. First thing I did was get a lawyer and try to get her. So I'm in court for that. But my son's mom and I are very close, and she lets me have him when he wants to come hang out with his sisters. We just had a birthday party, and we got the first photo of me and all the 4 biological children. So it was pretty cool. We've come full circle, is what I've said. So
Yeah.
it's been a long road, but
Yeah, but I mean, you're doing all this work on yourself. I mean,
yeah,
if you're watching this and you might have seen her original episode, if you don't know her, I mean, she's gone through a recent huge body transformation. Um,
yeah.
I would say that. What do you think? Is this the like compared to you in addiction? Weren't you like?
So I always was a heavy girl, but I was unable to stay thin, or at least like healthy looking. Like, I was obese. When I got out of jail, I was obese. I was morbidly obese. I was at my highest, I was almost 300 pounds. At the time, I was really focused on my recovery, so the weight really wasn't an issue. But once, I had contracted hepatitis C when I was in active addiction, so I did the treatment for that. I got all my ducks in a row for my kids and my recovery, and then I was able to focus on myself, and that's what I've been doing for the last year and a half. I got on Ozempic. We don't know. I don't know if you there's lots of people against it, but it saved my life, because at the time I was thinking, a 5-day bender, I could shed at least 20 pounds. So that was like, it saved my life. It really saved me from relapse. It really saved me from just poor mental health. I was down on myself. I watched the video of us when our first episode we did together, and I was a big girl. So I've lost 115 pounds, and I feel great, and I can walk up the stairs now, and I can play with my kids. And Ozempic's got a really bad rap, But
Does it? Is that around you, or is that because
well,
like?
from what I see on TikTok, I get a lot of hate because I don't know if it's hate because people are upset with themselves. They can't get coverage for it. They can't afford it. So they're like, that's not medication for weight loss. That's diabetic medication. There's already a shortage. You're taking it from diabetics. Well, your diabetes doesn't trump my morbid obesity, and your life is no more valuable than mine. And I will die either from a heart attack or from a substance, because I was ready to go back out. I was literally ready to go back out. So that's what I respond when they come at me with these comments. Like, it's sad. We can't just be happy for each other. It's always women that seems to, negate all the hard work that I put into it. They call it a quick fix or an easy fix. Well, it was a year and a half. I worked my ass off. It's not like I just needed to lose 20 pounds. I was morbidly obese. So yeah, it gets a bad rap.
I couldn't get coverage for it here. But I got coverage for Wegovy, which is like the generic version of Ozempic.
Yeah.
But then it went like on back order, and I hadn't been able to get it since like the second month that I tried it.
Ugh.
So I didn't see like any big results, unfortunately, because I didn't take it for long enough.
Yeah.
I'd taken it for like a month or 2 months or something like that until they ran out of stock of it, and I'm like,
yeah. Well, that's why I'm getting this hate, because first I have coverage. I've been fortunate to have coverage. And a lot of people can't, and a lot of people can't even get their hands on it. A lot of people can't get their hands on the sister drug, like you said. It's really hard. So I think people are just angry, and they take it out on people who have seen results with the medication. And I've bore the brunt of a lot of it.
Yeah. Well, it's because you're so open about it too. It's not like
I'm proud of it. I'm really proud of it, because I was never able to maintain a small figure unless I put a pipe to my lips. And a year and a half and 115 pounds, and not for a second did I use a substance to combat the weight. So I'm very proud of myself just because of that. Like, I'm a pretty girl regardless. I don't care if I'm 300 pounds, I'm still a pretty girl, and I always knew that. But I just wanted to feel better about just like, I can wear whatever I want now, and it's a good example for my kids, and it's just a good thing. And I don't know why people can be so hateful about somebody changing their life. So
it's projections. Yeah. It's probably 90% projections.
Yeah.
Their own insecurities.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't get too hung up on it. I mean, as long as you're staying honest about everything, you're going to not be affected by it negatively.
Well, I heard Oprah even say the other day, and I was really fucking angry about that she said, I've decided that it's the easy way out. Sweetie, you had how many years worth of weight loss content on your show, and you prayed back then for a medication to help fat people, and now you're saying it's the easy way out? I was so angry with that.
When that happened?
That was last week. She said it in People magazine, and I went on my TikTok and I blasted her. I was so, as a 90s kid, I grew up in the 90s, and Oprah is an idol of mine. I watched her. I still watch her. And first the Maui thing came out with her begging people for money, the billionaire begging people for money to help people in Hawaii. And then this whole comment with Ozempic, and I was just like taken aback, and I was kind of grossed out. And if Oprah can say something like that.
That was her and The Rock, right?
Yeah.
The biggest movie star of all time.
Right?
Like, one of the richest movie stars of all time. Like, there was one year that he made like $75 million, like something ridiculous like that.
Well, and Oprah's a billionaire.
Yeah.
Oprah could have, I can't even.
Yeah, for those who don't know, Oprah and not Will Smith.
Dwayne Johnson.
And Dwayne Johnson, The Rock, teamed up to promote. And I understand they probably have 1 billion followers on Facebook or on Instagram, and their Facebooks and their whatever pages, and they were promoting this fund to go towards Hawaii victims, which there should be a fund like that for Hawaii victims. But let people like talk about it and let them learn about it through like the news. Let
Yeah.
the news report on it so the news can
Yeah.
do something newsworthy. Let them report on it.
Well, Oprah apparently hired a whole bunch of security to keep these survivors off her land in Maui too. She wasn't out there. Her people weren't out there handing out water and giving all. She's got acres and acres and thousands of acres of land. You couldn't have put some of these poor survivors that were jumping in the ocean trying to get away from the fire, and you got land and security, and you're kicking the people that this is their homeland. Sweetie, you're not from Hawaii. It's like, what are you doing? So all of that and all of it together, that was just like, I was
And
so disgusted by her.
you drew your line in
Ugh.
the
Drew
sand.
my line in the sand. No more Oprah. No.
So, for those who didn't see your first episode or didn't listen to your first episode, you touched on it briefly that you went 20 years in addiction. What were your main drug of choices?
Everything. It started, I was very young, and it was the whole Oxycontin thing. I'm the part of the Oxy generation, and my whole life was destroyed because of Oxycontin. It went from, I was just a young kid in the 90s, early 2000s, and going to raves, trying ketamine and ecstasy. And it was, I was still in high school and doing well, and I was fine. But then somebody offered me an Oxy, and that was 20 years of active addiction. It went from Oxycontin to fentanyl patches, crack cocaine, IV cocaine. At the end, it was fentanyl and crack that really, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I just had somebody on the other day that he was like, no one trusts a crackhead because he used to go,
No.
he used to beg for money to like pay for his habit, and
Yeah.
he looked like a clean cut college kid the first time that he was begging for money, and he was making all this money saying that he was just trying to get a bus home to his family. He got mugged, and he would make 20 or 30 bucks an hour, so it paid for his drug habit. But when he like went back to try doing it after he started smoking crack, he was like, nobody gave me money. It's like
No.
everybody was
You
on.
look like a crackhead.
Yeah, he was like, I look like a crackhead. Nobody trusts a crackhead, and I'm like, yep,
No.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah. Nobody trusted me either. If my lips were moving, I was lying. So I was hurting every single person I came across. I was a savage. My addiction was really primal. All I cared about was being able to obtain it, and that was just my main drive in life. And I think I was really enabled by the people in my life because my parents had my kids, and I was able to sleep at night knowing my girls were having the childhood I had with my mom and dad. And not saying taking my kids and all that was enabling, but I was able to go for a really, really long time because the people in my life took care of everything that I just kind of walked away from, right? So, yeah, at the end of my run, nobody trusted me, and I definitely looked like a crackhead. I look at pictures now, and I make a lot of videos on TikTok about it. My first day of recovery compared to today, and it's night and day, right? So.
Now you mentioned that you got out of jail and you were morbidly obese. How much time did you serve?
I was in the local DJ for about 4 months. But then once I got out, I was on bail for a year, and the bail was like house arrest. Like, you cannot leave your house. I was checking in with the police 3 times a week. And then it's called the Elizabeth Fry Society. They were actually my bail supervisors. They were the ones that actually got me out. Um, and I had to report to them as well. So I was reporting like 4 times a week. And it was hard. It was really hard in the beginning, but I think everything just happened the way it did. And my arrest plus being on the Sublocade injection, I think all of it was kind of the catalyst that just kick-started it, and my recovery just flourished from then. And I haven't looked back for a second since then.
You,
It'll be 3 years.
you don't take the Subutex anymore, do you?
I'm on the Sublocade injection, actually, and I'll probably always be on it. I was on methadone since I was 17. Been on methadone, Suboxone, all of it. And I had heard about the Sublocade injection when I got out of jail. My parents had taken me out of town to the cottage to try to clean me up. And the pharmacist out in this little town where I was going to get my drink, she said, why don't you go on that shot they have? And I'm like, what shot? I had no idea. And then she said, it's only once a month. And I was like, what? I've been chained to this methadone clinic since I was a child, pretty much. And yeah, I went on it. They were offering it at my methadone clinic. And I educated myself on it, and I went on it, and it literally healed my brain. I have not had a craving for a substance. Like, I smoke my weed or whatever. I'm in Canada, it's legal, but an actual like hard substance, I don't fuck with it, and I don't want to, and I don't feel like I'm battling triggers and cravings. I'm very fortunate.
This podcast is also sponsored by BetterHelp. If you are looking for therapy and not able to get something right away locally, you can do that with them. Within 48 hours, you can find a therapist to get on telehealth with you. I mean, I haven't heard anything but great things from people that have already done it, that watch my show or listen to my show. If you're looking to get 10% off your first month, you can go to betterhelp.com/MJsPNPMCA. That is betterhelp.com/MJsPNPMCA.
So those 4 months, was that for the human trafficking?
Yeah. So I sat there. I was already on a whole bunch of other conditions. Like, I had a whole bunch of thefts. I was stealing a lot because I was hungry, and I got caught stealing a Reese's Pieces bar, and I was on bail for that or something, or on a promise to appear for that. Then I had a bunch of transportation frauds. I was jumping cabs from trap houses, and I got caught for that. So when I got arrested, I was already on a bunch of promise to appears for those charges. So I couldn't get out.
What do you mean by jumping cabs?
Well, I would call a cab, and my ruse was, I was always a pretty girl. So I would grab a purse, and I would say, okay, I'm just going to run up. I'm going to grab my debit card. I'll be right back. I'll leave my purse with you. And then I would never come back. Right. I would go into the whatever building it was, and I would just never go back. And they eventually would leave. But then they started to catch on. There's about 5 or 6 of them in the city, taxi companies that I'm not exactly allowed to contact anymore. But yeah, that was the transportation fraud. Active addiction.
See, I didn't know about that one. We didn't talk about that one yet.
No.
That one was news to me. I
That's embarrassing.
You said jumping cabs. I'm like, is she out there with a knife to each of these cabs stealing from them?
No. No.
Is that
but when I sold the Reese's Pieces bar, the floor walker, like the security, she didn't tell me who she was. So I pushed her when she was on me about the bar. Like, she's like, you're going to pay for that. Like, I'm standing in line paying for this toilet paper that the pharmacist has just given me $10 to pay for because I was broke. And I stole the chocolate bar and put it in my purse, and she followed me up. And I thought she was just a Karen, like in my face with her phone, pissed because I took a chocolate bar. So I fucking pushed her, and now I had assault, and I had stealing a friggin' chocolate bar and transportation fraud. So yeah, I was on all that when I got arrested for human trafficking.
That's kind of hilarious, the transportation.
Right?
Like, yeah. I never heard of that as like a thing. And I've had people
it's a big thing.
I've had people on here from New York City, and I didn't hear about that yet. Like,
my daughter actually, she takes taxis to work quite often, and said, Mom, they make me pay up front. I said, it's because you look like me. That's why. So they won't even let her get in the cab without her paying up front in the city. So I'm sure it's very prevalent. I'm sure lots of people do the whole taxi jumping, and you have to pay as soon as you get in the taxi now.
Look at you, just
setting examples.
Setting examples and making rules after you. They should call it the Mel.
I know.
They should call that instead of jumping cabs, they should call that the Mel.
Yeah, that's what it should be. It's the Mel.
Oh man. So you were jumping cabs. You were now. What do you mean? Did you get into any other kind of stealing, or was it just like chocolate?
No, stealing wasn't lucrative for me because, first of all, I was an escort, right? So I had boosters. Like, I had friends who would boost my makeup and my nails and all that. But I was an escort. That's how I made my money. That's how I ended up getting all caught up in the human trafficking thing.
Yeah, because you were you were like not a pimp, but
Well, they called me a madam. My baby dad calls me a pimp, you know. They call me a madam. Yeah, okay, whatever. I was helping girls make money, and I was helping girls so girls didn't have to be pimped out. These girls didn't have pimps. They had me, and I wasn't beating them, and I wasn't, I had an apartment, and yeah, I ran the calls and I made the ads, and then I pled guilty to what I was guilty of. And I don't think that a woman taking her power back, I wasn't taking these girls' money, but I also wasn't letting them smoke my drugs, right? Like, you're going to pull weight. You want to come here and get high, you're going to make money. And that's just how it ended up happening. And then one of them got in trouble, and then
the whole house of cards.
the whole house of cards. Yeah.
Yeah. I could, not that I could see you being a madam, but like you have that demeanor, like this is how we're gonna do things,
Yeah.
and people just kind of sit back and listen.
Yeah, pretty well. And I could make a girl do something. I was very manipulative. I could make you do something and convince you that it was your idea, like spend your rent money. And then you think like, I was a con artist, and I was,
Me too.
I think we all get that way in active addiction.
I used to do, you ever hear of a payday loan?
Well, of course, they still
Okay.
call me.
Same. There's
I
still,
owe them all.
oh my God. The first time I did it, I was like, I'll just try to make a couple $100. And and you fill that form out online, and then the phone calls start coming in. But I answered the first one. They're like, "Yeah, we can get you approved for $300." I said, "Okay, thank you," and I hung up. And then I got another call, and they're like, "We can approve you for $300." And then it went off in my head like, "Oh, they're not talking to each other. They don't know."
No.
And then I did like 10 of them. I answered like 10 calls, and I got $3,000 deposited in my account. I took all the money out, and then I shut my account down.
That's
And
what I did.
when they would go after that, I did that like 3 or 4 different times. And because I realized this isn't even
I
on
say she's dead when they call.
What's that?
I just say she's dead when they call and ask for me, or she's dead. She's not even alive. I don't know who you guys are looking for, but this Melissa girl is dead. Like,
They always call with the same thing. We're sending out a warrant for your arrest if you
yeah,
don't call by 5 p.m. today. I'm like, it's been 3 weeks. I'm calling your bluff. You haven't sent anybody to my house. And cops don't have that kind of time and energy to be able to
I don't think they can do that in Canada. I don't think that's how it works. Like, I don't think that we can get like arrested for dipping out on a payday loan.
I don't think we can either.
Yeah, I don't think so. I know they've threatened to take me to court in small claims court and all that, but I don't think it's not like child support where you can actually like go to jail and lose your license and all that. So thankfully, because
I felt bad for my dad because we have the same name. And
my brother and my dad too.
And they would call my dad to be like, "Hey, he owes us in payday loans."
Yeah.
And my dad, at first, my dad was like, "I'll just pay it and get him out of trouble."
Yeah.
And he did that. And then he told me, and I said, "Dad, I appreciate that, but don't do that again." I was like, "There's like 30 more companies." I was like,
they're coming.
I said, "The phone calls are coming. Just tell them we don't talk anymore, and I live across the country." And which was kind of true. I did live in California when I was I was in rehab and sober living. So I was talking to my dad. He's like, "Hey, I took care of this for you." I'm like, "Dad, there's like 29 more, bro." I was like, "Don't worry about taking care of them." I said, "They're not coming after me. Anything they say is just to elicit to try to get some money out of you."
Yeah. They don't have any real power, I don't think.
No, they did not.
I don't know.
They can't
I don't know anybody who's claimed bankruptcy over payday loans. So
they don't even show up on their credit report here.
Oh, yeah. I don't know about that here.
Yep.
I don't even. I'll never buy a house or anything like that, so I don't even care about that stuff at this point. I'm lucky to be alive. So
I'm trying to get my credit score back up this way when legalization happens here, because it's inevitable. Legalization of marijuana will become a thing.
Is it not?
Not in United States.
Well, in some states, though, right?
In some states, I live in a state that's not I'm only medical. I'm
Okay.
I'm a medical patient, right? So like I go to the dispensary with anybody that has a medical marijuana card. But like Joe Smith off the street that doesn't have a medical marijuana club can't even walk through the door because you have to show it just to get in.
We
So
have convenience stores all over. Like there's 50 of them
yeah,
now in our city that you just go there and buy weed. It's the coolest thing ever. Like,
yeah, no, that's not the case here.
oh,
But I want to open my own comedy club, and
okay.
I want to allow people to smoke during the shows,
Yeah.
and I won't serve alcohol
Yeah.
because I'm not being sober and dealing with a bunch of drunks.
No.
It's not going to happen,
No.
especially I live in a college town. So
Yeah.
like I've come to terms with I'm not buying any houses anytime soon, but I
Yeah.
I credit up this way and get a bank loan when I'm ready to start my own club.
Oh, well,
But
that's good then.
but yeah, I don't feel like, oh my God, the last thing I want to do as a sober person is deal with a room of drunks.
Right.
Like it's not,
Right. Me
if I
too.
yeah, it's the last thing I
Like I
want.
don't mind like my parents were always heavy drinkers, I think. Sorry, James and Doris. You're not going to see this anyways, but my parents were always heavy drinkers. So I think I'm really triggered by it. I don't like it. I don't drink. Like I'll have maybe once or twice a year, but I find alcohol is just it makes a person like a completely different human. Even I don't like it either.
Yeah,
So
there was somebody I was promoting looking for a guest in this one Facebook group, and they were like, no radio, no film, and no TV shows. And I'm like, listen, I don't go to meetings. I'm not breaking any traditions.
no,
Just because you have traditions that you need to live by doesn't mean that people don't want to tell their story openly. Like,
right?
like why would you say that? It
Yeah, that's not
takes away
on.
people's
I
voices
don't.
because they're like, now I can't talk about it because of AA. No, AA doesn't control you. You're allowed to do that. Like you can
Isn't it
tell your
sad? Isn't it sad that those programs are still like that?
it,
Like
it's sad and it's like kind of
it's toxic.
it is.
I'm going to
And
tell you a little story. I'm going to talk about AA for a second. So I went to AA because I was an addict, right? I was an alcoholic, but for me, being in a room like NA, for me, it was all people that I was in active addiction with, in jail with, probably robbed, owed money to. I just wasn't having it. So I would go to AA and I would find like the 13 stepping. And for those out there who don't know what that is, it's when you become intimate with somebody that's in the program.
usually
And
younger, usually it's a guy with 30 years and
yes, yes,
it
they're
gains their trust really quickly
right,
because they're like this wisdom of AA and I'll be sober if I
right.
listen to him.
Right. So these men, I would come in and I was trying to be sober and they would see a vulnerable girl coming in and then I would relapse and then these men would become clients. You know what I mean? So when people on my TikTok talk about why don't you do meetings or is there a reason, did something, I just say like for me, it's a lot of wolves in sheep's clothing that are using the program as a way to prey on vulnerable women. That's just my opinion. So I when I sponsor, like I try to offer like they really talk like in AA they talk about like they don't want the male female relationships or the female male sponsorship relationships, and I think that it can be done as long as it's not in a structure like AA has where I don't know, the
Yeah,
anonymity thing to me is a little.
the person
I
I
don't know.
consider my sponsor is a woman. You know what I mean?
Pardon?
This person that I consider a sponsor is a woman, and
Right.
she's big in
Right.
AA, but like I don't go to meetings, and she knows that.
And she's cool with that? Like she doesn't push it on you?
She lives 3,000 miles away.
Okay, but she doesn't say like, oh, you should hit a meeting. If she comes to you with like you're a vulnerable moment, she doesn't say go get a meeting.
No, she does.
Oh, she does. Okay.
Yeah, she definitely does.
Yeah, and do you? You've never
Sometimes I
talked
do.
about this.
Sometimes I do.
Cool.
Sometimes I do because I'll know that she's right.
Right.
You know what I
That's
mean?
good
Like,
though.
so, but a lot of the times, there's sometimes where like I'm not even gonna call her because I know what she's gonna say, and I don't
Right.
feel like going to a fucking meeting
Right.
now.
Yeah. And that's the unfortunate part, I think. My sponsor was the first sponsor I had was such a horrible experience. She was very into religion and kind of like a Jesus, like Bible thumper. And I was in rehab and she was sending me literature, but it was all like Jesus stuff. And knowing full well that I was, first of all, Indigenous and not into organized religion. And I had made that pretty clear to her a few times. And then when I relapsed, her true colors kind of came out. And this was all like just my experience, but she made it like I'm a horrible person and I didn't deserve my kids because I relapsed. And it turned me off from the whole program. Like I felt very ostracized. Being honest about anything in those programs, I felt that they would gang up and they would do the catty little, so that's just been my experience about it. But I try to be a better sponsor than I've ever had, because I've never had good experiences with sponsors.
Yeah, I got lucky. I've had some that were like not Bible, because I made sure that like I wasn't getting set up with a Bible thumper. Like I wasn't gonna pick you.
See, I was made to get a sponsor. Like this was when after my son had been taken and my parents were finally like, I had a little bit of sobriety. I was living in a domestic violence shelter, and my mom, there was some stipulations if I was going to see the kids, and that was one of them. She actually would go with me, my mom, and she made me find a sponsor. So I had really no choice. And it turned out to be a horrible experience. So you can't shame people into recovery. You can't hate them into recovery. You can't, so I think my parents know that now.
I think your Bible thumping sponsor would hate my Bill Murray is Jesus behind me.
Bill Murray is Jesus.
That's why I had that painted for me. I'm like,
love it.
Yeah.
I'm all about it. I love it. I love him.
Yeah, he's always great. Every time I see him, like there's classic movie. Is that purple in your hair too?
Yeah, there's some pink in it.
I can see all of it. Like at first I wasn't noticing. I guess the sun moved, because now I can kind of notice it. That's pretty
neat, eh? It's a wig. It's not even real.
Yeah, and you said A. See, I told you had an accent. And before we got on, she's like, I forgot how thick your accent is. I'm like, you talk like you're Canadian.
Do I though? Like, do I have an accent?
You say "bud" a lot, or
oh
bud.
Yeah, bud.
Yeah.
That's a super Canadian thing. Yeah.
That is just so big Canadian.
Yeah, bud.
Yeah. So that's Canadian, and then the A is obviously Canadian.
Do I say A as well?
You did. That's what reminded me to make fun of you.
Okay.
You wanted to talk shit and make fun of me for my accent.
Speaking of Canadian, I just want to give a shout out. It is Truth and Reconciliation Day. I meant to talk about this in the beginning, but it's Truth and Reconciliation Day. If you guys don't know what that is, please take a moment to go and educate yourself. Today, we wear orange to represent the atrocities that happen in residential schools for Indigenous people. If you are interested in it, you can go to www.residentialschoolsurvivors.com, and you can find all the information on what happened in these schools and the bodies of the children that we are finding. No, it is not fake. Yes, they're actually finding bodies. And they're babies, and it's not going to stop. It's going to keep happening. Please do not believe the misinformation. Just like there are Holocaust deniers, there are also residential school atrocity deniers. What happened in these schools did happen. We've been hearing this from our elders our whole lives. The latest school that closed was only in 1996. We did not only deal with residential schools, but we also had the 60s scoop that came in and took everybody's children. So please, guys, take a moment and go and educate yourself. You'll find a lot of the content on my TikTok page, and I follow a lot of amazing Native and Indigenous creators, First Nation creators. Please just go educate yourself on it, and wear orange today if you can. Orange isn't my color, so I wore black with some orange eyeshadow. But I just wanted to talk about that because it's very important to me as an Indigenous woman, as somebody who is Métis, just learning about my culture. It was hidden and denied and lied about for so long because it was something that my family is very ashamed about, and a lot of families were, they called us savages. So I just wanted to talk about it for a second, and yeah.
I've heard about, because we're stateside, so we don't hear about all of them, but I do remember hearing one about from, I think Alberta area.
Yes, that was
Of
the first one.
That was the first one. Okay.
Yes.
I remember hearing, and there was like 200 bodies or some shit.
Yeah, there was like 98 that they found at first. Very sad that the stories that are coming out saying that that never happened and that the bodies were never found. Every day they're doing ground penetrating radar all over our country.
Yeah.
There are thousands of these schools, hundreds of these schools, thousands of survivors, thousands of people who will tell the same stories of sexual abuse, of physical abuse, and then just children disappearing and never being seen again. So
you're actually the second in Native that's been on my show. The other girl was out in Alberta area. I think she was outside of Edmonton because we were both Oilers fans.
That's where it happened. Yeah.
And that's what I thought. Yeah, and she was talking about not this, but just talking about how the abuse that would happen, because she's also Native, so all those stories they come down also, so she knew what was happening too.
Like, you know how African Americans have a bad rapport with the police in your country? Well, that's how it is for Indigenous people in our country. We not only have been battling the government just to live on our own land and have clean drinking water, because there's reserves in my province particular. I'm in Ontario, but they don't even have clean drinking water. They're living in third world country, and in Canada, and they are like, Turtle Island is our land. Like, it's crazy to me that, you guys see what happened with George Floyd, but the stuff that our police and the police brutality that goes on in our country is very, very rarely broadcasted, shown in the media.
Documented.
I find a lot of my information on TikTok about it, but if you're interested, guys, please go educate yourself on it, because it's very sad that what's going on in our country even till this day with First Nations and Indigenous people.
Send me that link.
I bit my lip.
Send me that link and I'll put it in the bio. And instead of starting with that, we'll end with that. I appreciate you coming back on and always being so candid and open about your story. I definitely appreciate that, and I'm sure you'll be back on again in the future with another update.
Awesome.
All
Thank you so much for having me.
Bye.
Bye.